New Year health hacks on a budget. Transmitter 42. Happy New Year to Transmitter 42 listeners. We once again welcome Kimberley Huggins, a Low Carb Keto Certified primal health nutrition expert who joins us to discuss tips and techniques for the new year to achieve better health that won't break the bank. She brings years of personal experience combined with nutritional studies to bear on America's health problems. Please welcome Kimberley Huggins to Transmitter 42. Hello again, Kimberley. Welcome back.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, 2025.
Hard to believe.
So you have organized a nice list for us for everyone to consider to make to make changes today that will improve their health markedly.
Going forward. So I always like to look, obviously, it's the first of a new year. And a couple years ago, I stopped looking at it. I don't like resolutions for the term. I prefer intentions because one of the things you have to understand about your health is you have to make and you do make certain decisions, whether you realize it or not, that are either helping you or hurting you. And probably if you're not consciously making the decisions, you're erring on the side of not good decisions because it's set up that way. So we're just going to run through some things that I think and this is not saying you have to implement them all or implement them all at once, because that might be too confusing. When I started my health journey, and it is a journey because once you change something or you're successful, or you may find you do something that doesn't work for you, although I think the things I'm going to talk about today would definitely help anyone. But over time, you'll change things. And for some people, it's overwhelming. I think most people to do a lot at one time. So these are just some good, simple things. Most of them don't cost anything, or they cost very little. That you could start doing literally today to improve your quality of life.
We start off with turn your devices off.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. We all know we have our technology and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And I'm not saying, big old bad technology, but I do think we're using it too much. And for a lot of reasons, it's not good for our health. There's blue light exposure, there's short attention span. I mean, the list goes on. There's, plenty of articles out there if you want to look it up. But to just bring it back down to a personal, if you've been wondering if you're on your device too much, if you're just thinking about it, or maybe you're looking at people in your family and you're thinking, wow, we're on these devices a lot. We didn't used to do this. See if you can go without it for a day. Just see if you can go with it. Just challenge yourself, or maybe even your family, but you start with yourself. Because you should know. You should be able to know, because it can become an addiction like anything else. So if you say, okay, I'm not going to pick up my phone today. Make it on the weekend, when you don't have to use it for work or whatever. Just pick a day, and I'm not going to look at my phone today. And if it bothers you, like if you feel anxious, if you find yourself reaching for it before you've even made a conscious decision to do it, you probably have a problem. And I'm not telling you to get the phone totally out of your life, although I would say there's no reason for a child to have a device, but that's a whole nother episode. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to get some hate on me for that one, but that's for another day. As an adult, you do need to be aware of how much time it's sucking out of your life and how much time you actually spend on it versus how much time you need to be on it. And if you feel compelled to be on it, like I said, if you're anxious because you can't check your phone, that is a sign of a problem. So you might want to evaluate that and adjust life accordingly, because it's affecting your brain, it's affecting your emotions, and it's affecting your sleep quality. So it's important to get it under control.
Would you argue that the people who make the phones and the people who then provide content for the phones are doing things to captivate your attention in ways that are not natural?
100%. And I only need to put forth the evidence of all the people in Silicon Valley that run the tech companies send their kids to school that do not allow personal devices to be used during school. They know what it does. And there's a reason it's allowed to be done. Mm-hmm. So you have to take control yourself. For you and your kids, don't let your kids dictate how much time they're on the phone. That's not up to them. That's up to you. You're the parent.
Stop eating Frankenfood.
Yeah, this is my big one. This probably should have been.
Especially after the holidays like we had.
Yeah, this probably should have. I mean, this is the biggest one that will affect your life. No question. If you don't do anything else, other than maybe stop smoking. But,
we are what we eat. Totally correct.
Totally. And I don't even think people understand it's not just about your weight. It's literally how your brain functions. Like, your brain cannot function. It's an energy hog. Your brain cannot function if you do not give it the right nutrients. And if you're eating the SAD diet, which is the standard American diet, which is 70 to 80% processed food, your brain is starving. Your cells are literally starving for nutrition. So, I mean, I think everyone benefits from eating low carb, but if you would just go on what I call the JERF diet for 2 weeks.
JERF.
The JERF diet stands for just eat real food. Now, when I say that, that means if it's in a box, okay, that's no. So Doritos are not real food. Cereal is not real food. I don't care what it says on the front, fortified with 15 vitamins and minerals. That's all synthetic stuff that your body can't use. So it's junk food. Cereal's legit junk food. So just eating real food means food that is as close to its natural creation as possible. So like frozen fruits and vegetables are great, especially now in the winter because we don't have a lot of, it's not time for real fruits and vegetables because what you're getting in the produce section right now in the winter is not the best choice. But if it's frozen, as long as it doesn't have sauce on it or, anything like that, that's fine. Okay. So even though it's frozen and in a bag, that's not ultra processed food. But most of what's in the middle of the grocery store is junk. Shop the perimeter. And just try to move your diet to real food, real eggs, real meat, real seafood. Nothing, most things are in a box or a bag or covered in plastic or all that. Not a good choice.
Back on eggs, make sure you have eggs that are fed by chickens who are not being forced to be vegetarians, mm-hmm. which they are not naturally.
That's true. Now, and I will admit, it is more difficult now. You tell people to read labels and you're just like, oh, that's just one more thing I got to do. I don't have time to live my life now. But you don't have time not to because, once again, back to the beginning, what you're putting in your body and what your kids are consuming is 100% related to, and it goes even bigger than people understand. If your kids are anxious or they can't concentrate or they're high strung or they're lethargic, I mean, fill in the blank for almost any of that. Not just your kids, you too. Okay, most of that is because there's a nutrient deficiency. And if you eat real food, you not as likely to get that as if you're eating Frankenfood.
Get outside.
Yeah, this one seems kind of, well, maybe it doesn't seem obvious. I don't know. I'm not necessarily a big outside door lover, or I haven't been in my life. But I do think there's something to, and over the last couple years, what I've learned, we need to be outside. There's something just inherently, we're connected to nature. And the lives we live now don't facilitate that. So you're going to have to make a conscious decision, at some point to get outside. And the more the better. I'm not saying you have to love outside. I'm not saying you have to go camping or anything like that. But I'm just saying, take a walk outside. Sit outside for just a little while. Now, I know it's cold right now, so maybe that's not. But you know what? You would be surprised. Even if you're outside when it's cold, 10, 15, 20 minutes, if you're walking, you're not going to get that cold. So, if you're sitting, yeah, you might get cold. But if you just go out for a walk in the cold, you'd be surprised at how good you'll feel after it. There is a link with exposure to cold. It positively affects your body, how it works, how it has to respond to that. So just the same with heat too. It's just a different response. So I think we need to be outside. Once it's nicer weather and you can spend longer outside, do it. Make sure you're, just take a walk through the woods, go to local park and, walk around the lake, whatever. Be near some water, because that's another thing. Your body, your parasympathetic system responds positively to the sound of running water.
Interesting.
So, yes, you need to get outside. Walking is one of the best things you can do for your body that costs zero. It's not like joining a gym, having to put money out for that, having to put money out for a trainer. It costs nothing to walk. We don't do it enough. We don't get enough movement in general during the day, but walking is certainly something you could add. And I would also say if you can walk 10 to 20 minutes after you eat a meal, it's hugely beneficial for your body and regulation of blood sugar. So I would do that. And I would also make sure you get exposed to the sun. Do not be a victim of years of sun phobia from the medical industry and all the industries that want to sell you all the sunblock. I mean, I'm guilty. I think all the time, with my first kid, I would slather him in sunblock before he would go out to play football. And I was just like a freak about it and all the things. And actually, the studies now show that it is much more detrimental to not have sun exposure than to get sun exposure.
So the sun is a nutrient.
Yes.
Obviously, too much of it can be a problem, but obviously we need some of it because that's the way we were developed.
Right. And I would also say that the current problem is people aren't getting too much. The problem is people aren't getting enough. And that's because your body receives sunlight to make vitamin D. And when your body has enough, it turns off. It turns that off. So you can't really get too much. Now, if you don't get enough vitamin D for whatever reason, like it's wintertime, or maybe you do have a genetic issue with that, it's called a SNP, and you just don't get enough, you supplement. But what you should do, I'm not against supplements at all. I think some people you need to do it. But the best way is having sun. That's the best way. Supplement comes if you can't. And I actually just read a study recently, which is kind of shocking. For every one person that gets basically skin cancer, or cancer that's related to the sun exposure, there's 55 people who get cancer because they don't have enough sun exposure. So it's obviously the scales are out of whack.
These are cancers that come because of poorer health generally.
Because of low vitamin D. And the best way to do that, if you want the cheapest, if you don't want to buy a supplement or you're against supplements, and I'm not against supplements, but I will say you can't just go and get vitamin D at the local mass retailer because you're buying garbage. The supplement industry is a multi-million-dollar industry, which 2/3 of it is owned by big pharma. Okay, so you have to be really careful about your supplements and the kind of supplements you buy. And yes, you're going to have to pay more. So the goal of this is, if you're looking for a low cost and not have to spend a lot of money, get your vitamin D from the sun. It's the best way anyway, and it doesn't cost anything.
And neither does sleep.
Correct. So the next one be, we're on a roll here. If you stop eating franken food, turn your devices off, get outside and walk, see the sun, and now sleep. So far, we've spent no money. So most people in America are chronically sleep deprived. We kind of wear it as a badge of honor that, I only need 5 hours of sleep, or I only got 4 hours of sleep last night. See what all I can accomplish. You're really not. You're just cheating yourself in the long run. Your body has to have a certain amount of sleep. Now, we've all been sleep deprived. I mean, anybody with a newborn baby knows you're not getting your sleep, okay? But eventually, once all the things, and if they don't settle down, you have to make them. But you have to get your sleep and it needs to be on a schedule. So it's not going to bed at 10 o'clock one night and going to bed at 1 o'clock the next night and then going to bed at 11 o'clock and then staying up till 2 a.m. That wrecks your hormones. So it's important to get to sleep I would say, shoot for between 9 and 11, whatever works for your schedule. It needs to be in line with the circadian rhythm. So your body really responds best to when the sun comes up and when the sun goes down. And if you are not, and your body's really on more of a clock than you would think. So certain things happen to your body at night when you're resting. And if you're not asleep during that time for that to happen, it doesn't happen. So your brain is getting rejuvenated from like midnight to 2, and then your body's getting rejuvenated from 2 to 4. Okay? So if you are not sleeping then, or if your sleep is messed up, or your body's not relaxing, or you're not in REM sleep, it's not going to happen. And then over time, that leads to health problems. It's stress in the body. Your body does not like chronic long-term stress. Short-term stress is good for your body. It makes your body adjust and adapt. But lack of sleep is long-term stress, and it is not a good thing. And over time, it's the number one risk factor for cardiovascular disease.
Sleep.
Disturbed sleep, because of what it does to your body.
Stress, right?
Right.
So all forms of stress, but sleep-induced stress being one of the
Right.
many, I assume.
Sleep-induced stress is directly related to cardiovascular disease, which is why, it's so important if you have or if you haven't been diagnosed, you need to make sure sleep conditions like sleep apnea are under control. That is or if you're not sleeping well, if you have insomnia, if you're waking up a lot, if you're not getting enough sleep. And everybody's different. It is true, some people don't need a lot of sleep. But you can't lie to yourself. I'm one of the people who only needs 4 hours of sleep. That's just not realistic. You may only get 4 hours of sleep, but it's not good for you. It's not what your body wants.
So I think finally we're getting to something that may cost little or something. Join gym to lift heavy things.
Right. I mean, this is kind of in the middle because you can lift heavy things at home depending on what you do. I mean, if you work on a farm, if you actually do the work on the farm, you're probably lifting heavy things. But if you're like most Americans, or if you live, especially if you live in an urban or suburban area, you're probably not lifting heavy things because that's not the kind of life we have anymore. So if you if you can't, if you're not very dedicated or creative, that's the word I'm looking for. If you're not very creative to find something around your house to lift heavy things on a regular basis. Like, I don't know how many people have, an old tire in their backyard or, something like that. If you're not really creative in coming up with ways to do that, then yes, I would suggest to join a gym. There are some out there that are inexpensive, but then once again, you're going to have to work it into your life. And it's just important because one day you're going to be old. And if you haven't created the muscle mass to support you in your old age, you won't have it. The saying, use it or lose it, is true. That's your body, your muscles, and your brain power. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Okay. Getting your blood tested.
Okay, once again, this is the one item that does cost, unless it's time for you to go for your physical and get your annual blood work and your copay is $0. I don't know if anybody has $0 copay. Maybe you do for physical now. I think physicals, maybe you don't pay for copay.
Physicals typically, yes, at least on our plan.
Okay, well, I guess that depends on if you have insurance or not, what kind of insurance you have or whatever. But the point I want to get to is, let's say you don't have insurance. Let's say you really can't afford to go to the doctor right now or whatever. There are ways to get your blood tested that really do not cost a lot. So you have to get your blood tested because that's the only way you will know if you have an approaching health problem. Okay, so I'm using the number one thing because really insulin resistance is at the root cause of most of the health conditions that we see and are worried about in our society right now. So, and that will manifest 10, 20, 30 years before you ever have a problem, before your A1C ever falls off the cliff, before you get cancer, before you get diabetes, before you get PCOS, although PCOS is happening earlier, before you have a stroke, before you have a heart attack, any number of conditions. Your fasting insulin is a canary in the coal mine. And I just want to add, because it just popped into my head, most doctors will not give this test. It is not on a regular blood work panel, which is why I say you have to get it yourself. Because the doctors will not do this test because there is no drug for high insulin. If they could make money off of high insulin, there would be a drug, and they would test for it. But because there's no money to be made, they don't test for it. So you have to know, you have to get that test and you have to know. So you want it less than 10, ideally less than 4, but that's difficult. But if you could get it under, let's split them a difference, 8. If you can get it under 8. But you have to know where you're starting from to know what you need. So get your fasting insulin tested. You can go to ownyourlabs.com. There's other online lab places out there, but we've used this one before and it works. The guy who runs it keeps the prices as low as possible because he wants people to get their blood tested and know. You can get a fasting insulin test for $14.40. I think everybody can afford that. Skip your Starbucks coffee for a couple of days and you've paid for your fasting insulin test. And then other than that, well, let me back up. So you need talking about getting your blood work done, you need to know your A1C, your triglyceride to HDL ratio, your waist to height ratio, and that's not a blood test. Your blood pressure, you can get that with a little wiggle room, but you can go to Walgreens and sit down and get your blood pressure taken at the blood pressure machine, yeah. Whatever. Giant's got one, I think, or at least they used to. And like I said, your fasting insulin. So those things that I just mentioned are your markers for if there's a problem. So if you get those and any of them are out of range, then you know you need more testing. So you can get your fasting insulin test at ownyourlabs.com, and you can also get the Heart Healthy Bundle at ownyourlabs.com, which has fasting insulin, A1C, trigs, HDL. So everything that you need is in that bundle. And that's $59.60.
Wow.
$60. Like I said. Now, I know a lot of people are like, they don't want to pay anything, but it's pay now or pay later.
Your knowledge is power, and sometimes you have to pay for it yourself.
Right. Because I was an example of somebody, I probably have had high insulin for 30 years. And I remember what they frequently do. If you go in and you have one of these tests and it's a little off, and when I was in my 30s, I had high triglycerides. And they'll say, oh, well, you're young. You don't need to worry about that. That's exactly when you need to worry about it. Now, I also want to say, if you're over 50, you can't have the attitude of, well, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it, so who cares what my numbers are? You can't do that because, do you want to, what kind of life do you want to have going forward? And it does impact it, because my thinking is so many people who have diabetes now, you don't want to, when I think about my future, I don't want it to be going to kidney dialysis every other day. I don't want it to be, I'm blind in one eye because of diabetes. I don't want it to be, I had my foot amputated and then I have to live life with an amputated foot and all that entails because I didn't get my blood sugar under control. So whenever you find out, is the time to do something about it.
Right. The panel I got was much more comprehensive, wasn't it? Because it was quite a bit more expensive.
I agree. This was just trying to keep it least expensive as possible and just look at.
Yeah, it sounds like the Heart Healthy Bundle was created to make this as simple a process as possible.
I think so. They've adjusted some things since you had yours done. Now, there are other tests that you had that I do think you need to look at, because you could have some of these things might look okay, but if you still have inflammation in your body, that's damaging your body.
Inflammation is something that you can almost see on people's faces as you walk around. Inflamed look.
Right. And most people, it's kind of like the frog in the water. You just don't realize it. They talk about the frog in the water, and you just heat it up a little at a time and it doesn't jump out because it doesn't notice. I think people are kind of like that generally, because lots of times people just think how they feel is how they're supposed to feel. Oh, I'm old. Oh, my arthritis. Oh, my this. Oh, this hurts. Oh, I get up in the morning and everything hurts. Oh, I can't stay awake. I can't. There's a reason. There's a reason. It's not supposed to be like that.
A reminder to the viewers that my arthritis is gone. The finger arthritis.
So, that's legit.
And I was worried big time about that because my poor dad had that all the way to the end. And he got along with it just because you have to. But he was not happy, I can tell. He was very, very sad that he had fingers that didn't do his commands for him,
Right. And once again, back to, it's all about your quality of life. So, yes, you could be living at 70. What kind of life do you want to have at 70? Do you want to be, active and doing things with your grandchildren and, going shopping whenever you want, going walking whenever you want? Or do you want to sit in front of the TV all day? Or, God forbid, you have a stroke and you're an invalid in your bed for 2 years, and that's your life, because that happens. It was my aunt's life for the last 2 years of her life. It's a life I don't want. I don't want it for anybody.
I'll inject a point here about taking care of yourself. You really don't want to be a burden to others as much as you possibly can. Obviously, at the end, you'll need help. Got it. But you can take steps to not be a problem financially, emotionally, etc., through these steps.
Right. And I would add, and of course, this kind of goes right into the next one. Education of your responsibility you have for yourself and your loved ones around you. Okay. So we have taken care of people in their last days.
Several times now.
Yes. And we've seen it. Okay. And whatever you may think it is, if you've never done it, it doesn't go how you think it's going to go. But my point in saying all that is from seeing that, you don't want to, there's certain things you don't want your kids to have to go through if they don't have to. And that part of that is, like I said, taking care of yourself as much as possible. So you have to educate yourself. You do have to understand that, yes, you do have a responsibility to take care of yourself. You have a responsibility to do a basic amount of self-care. It's not up to anyone else. Frankly, it's not up to society. And that's not how we necessarily look at it. But one of the problems we're going to have going forward is healthcare is bankrupting us. I mean, it's the fastest, people talk about all the things, but it's the fastest growing industry in the country. Okay. And people may think, oh, well, that's good. Well, no, that just means it is because there's that many sick people. And right now, we are spending more on healthcare than we are on the military. Everybody always screams about the military budget and how big it is and how wasteful and how ridiculous. The healthcare industry dwarfs that, how much we are spending. And so much of it is being spent. I mean, if you want to say it's a good thing that we spend money for that, okay, but it's money we don't need to spend.
Let me guess, you're about to say we spend healthcare money on treating the sick, not preventing the sick.
Correct. There's absolutely nothing that goes into prevention because nobody makes any money off of that. And I'll prove it to you. So when we were going through COVID and we're all trapped in our houses watching the TV that's full of nothing but propaganda. But is it propaganda that is encouraging people to make sure they're getting their vitamin D, make sure they're eating right, make sure they're getting some exercise so they don't get sick? Was any of that, did anybody ever see a public service announcement on the TV from any government agency?
Something as simple as get out and walk.
Correct. No. There's no money in that. There's no money in health. Now, people will say, well, there's plenty of money in the supplement industry. Yes, but I would just say ultimately you need to look at the standard statement, which is true. A patient cured is a patient lost. Now, I'm not saying every doctor out there is evil and, doesn't want to help people and doesn't want to help their patients and all that. But I will say that doctors are trained by the pharmaceutical industry because 90% of medical schools are funded in some form or fashion by the pharmaceutical industry. They are not trained in nutrition. Doctors are trained to medicate. So to a hammer, everything's a nail.
And some doctors have their hands tied.
Yes, they do.
I would say our doctor, he's obviously following the script, but you develop ways of communicating him with them in secret.
Agreed.
So almost little ways you put things, and you get a response that conveys understanding. So he can give you advice without giving you advice.
And I will just say two things about doctors that's important for people to understand. So 80% of doctors now are employed by a group.
Health group, yeah.
They're owned by a health system. Okay. So that means, like you said, their hands are tied. They have to do whatever the group says they have to do. It's just a fact of life. And then I would also say, and this is really important, we've talked some ourselves about how we just feel like, and this is more than just the medical industry, but how much things have changed in the world after COVID. But there's one thing I don't think people have really thought about, and that's Obamacare. And one of the things that has happened in the medical industry because of Obamacare is they are absolutely divorced from results, other than, to them, success as defined by the law now, defined by Obamacare, is how many patients are on medication. That's the mark for success or failure. It's not how many people are getting healthy. It's how many people are on drugs. And I actually like to use that word better than medication. Medication sounds nice and helpful, and it can be when needed. But most all of us are on drugs that are causing something else down the road. One more point about a doctor, though. We really like our primary, but I would say if you have a doctor that gets mad if you ask him a question, that gets an attitude if you try to engage him on anything, that is offended because you won't take his advice, you need to get another doctor. Because your doctor is supposed to be your partner. He's not your boss. He's not your, if he thinks he's the one that makes the decisions and he should be in charge, you need to get a new doctor because it's not his skin in the game, it's yours. You're the one that's going to pay if his advice is wrong. A little bit of a rant, but none of that cost you anything. So we were talking about educating yourself. You need to know what your blood work should say. Yes, I'm sorry. That's just one more thing that you've got to know, but yeah, you got to know it.
Feel free to insert your blood work into your medical record at your doctor and surprise them.
So, and then so with that, your responsibility, okay, if you're not raising healthy kids, if we are not raising healthy kids as a society, what is society going to look like? 80% of kids now, their diet is ultra-processed food, and then they have all these health problems. How is society going to run? How's society going to function if everybody's sick?
Yeah, like the young man who is on blood pressure medication in his young 20s.
Right.
That's absurd.
It is absurd. And so what I'm trying to get people to understand is there has to be a paradigm shift. So they used to tell us up until recently, really recently, all these things that you get, diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, heart disease, all this illness, it's just what happens to you when you get old. Over 50, everybody jokes about, things start, falling apart, check engine light comes on, whatever, Okay, this stuff is happening to people in their 20s and 30s. So what's the excuse? They're not old. It's obviously not an old person's problem. It's a human problem. So you have to educate yourself and you have to understand whether you like it or not. I know lots of times people are like, I'm responsible for all this stuff. I don't want to be responsible for one more thing. Sorry. You got to be responsible for yourself. And you got to be responsible for your family and how they're raised. That's really, people need to think about that. People need to think about that from being a good citizen is providing for the future of the country. And I don't necessarily mean monetarily, but, young people or people who are working now are paying for people, this is going to be controversial, are paying for people that are on Social Security right now. Now, People who are on Social Security hate to hear that because I know you paid into it your whole life. I get it. But I can't help that the government screwed up and spent all the money and, blew it and did all the things they weren't supposed to do, and your money's gone. It's already been spent. So the people who are working now are paying for you. Okay, what's going to happen when those people get older if nobody's there to pay for them? If there's way less people because they've all died because they've had some horrible illness that they could have prevented. It really is all, tragically in some cases, very much connected. So
I would argue that since we went there, Social Security was never meant to be a savings account, even though it was sold that way by the Roosevelt administration. They didn't sell it that way when they went to court to defend it.
Correct.
So, and I'm cool with that. It's making sure that someone who, this is a weird way to put this, is unlucky enough to live a long life after their retirement will not be without means of some sort.
But I would argue that the powers that be are making sure you don't live longer.
Yeah.
The goal really for Social Security, the goal is for you to die before you get a penny of it.
Or right at that average point. There's a actual line in the sand where whatever you put in and you get out, that's the average age of death. You can actually put this on a spreadsheet with the numbers. That's why they want to continually raise the rates, raise the retirement age. We won't go into that.
That's a whole nother topic.
There. It's a part of our retirement. And that's the way it is. Maybe for another episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Or bring an economist in to help with the numbers.
Back to health. So, it's so interconnected. And I will just say it's the best thing you can do for you and your family, because if you're healthy, you have more choices than if you're not. If you're not healthy, you're very easily controlled by all these extenuating factors that maybe wouldn't be a part of your life if you were healthy. Health is freedom. We all get that money is freedom. If you're in debt, you're a slave, or if you don't have, we all get money as freedom, but health is too. Big
time. Cook your meals at home.
Yeah, this one, I don't even know if this is, once again, it doesn't cost you anything. Cook your meals at home. Just about any food you get. I'm not saying don't ever go out to eat. I mean, obviously we enjoy eating out, but don't make it consistent thing. The food is the cheapest food that the restaurant can get away with buying because they're maximizing their profit. Nothing wrong with that, but you need to understand that. Fast food is just an absolute no. It's if you're jerfing it, if you're just eating real food, you need to bypass fast food. But you're in control of what you put in your body if you cook at home. You're cooking it. You've bought the ingredients. You know exactly what's in it. And it's cheaper too. I think people, they con themselves maybe. Lots of, I just don't have time. Everybody's got the same 24 hours in a day. You have to make time for what you make time for. If you can watch Netflix for an hour or whatever, you can cook your food. You can prep on the weekends. You can cook ahead. Find what works for you. It's better for you and cheaper in the long run.
Just so everyone knows, Kimberly's an excellent cook. She learned to cook a long time ago, even before we became aware of better foods and such. And now she's applying those talents to the new paradigm.
Correct.
And exploring and trying things. I think most of the time there's success. Obviously, not everything. Christmas is always a sort of an exception, but that's the way it goes. What do you have in that crock pot right now? It's something new.
It's just a meatloaf.
A meatloaf made with what? That makes it keto. Just real brief.
Basically, no bread. I mean, I was getting ready to say, changing your diet does not have to be boring. The food doesn't have to taste bad. You don't have to be deprived. You don't have to hate what you're eating. I would also say that if you do, then and this is legit because I had it, there's some sort of emotional attachment you have to food, which is a lot of people. And so you have to evaluate that, because you really should just be, and I'm not saying you don't enjoy food when you eat it, but it shouldn't be like your go-to for everything. Like, you shouldn't eat when you're sad, and eat when you're mad, and eat when you're bored, and eat when you're happy, and eat when you're... And I know it's kind of hard because lots of things in our lives, celebration-wise, we eat when people get married. We eat when people die. We eat when people... that's part of it. But I just... And then this is a whole nother topic, but we do eat too much in our society. It's about what we're eating, but it's also about how we're eating and when we're eating. Topic for another day. Cook your meals at home. They did a study. I already said control your food source, but they did a study, and poor people who cooked at home were healthier than wealthy people who ate out.
Interesting. Because the poor people were forced to cook on.
Well, if you eat out, you're eating bad food, and you're eating bad food, and if you're eating out a lot, that means you're getting it a lot. Getting bad food a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people are, especially in suburban life, are geared to the convenience. I get, because I was there. If you're a mom and you've worked all day and you've had a rough day, the last thing you want to do is think about what you're going to cook when you go home. So you just drive by Chick-fil-A on the way home. Okay? But what's happening now is people are doing that every day.
Yeah.
And that just cannot happen, because your kids are in trouble. Your kids are in trouble. And 90% of that is what they're putting in their bodies.
Soda being one of the obvious.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
So since we have time here, obviously the everyday sort of restaurants and the fast food places, they make their food as cheaply as they possibly can. What happens with the finer restaurants that you only take out twice a year? You go to the anniversary or our birthday.
Well, I would say there's two things there. You're more than likely getting a better quality of food, because sometimes when you pay more, you do get what you pay for. People, finer dining establishments, people go to them because they don't want the everyday experience. So people are going to expect a higher level. Obviously, yes, those restaurants are still, ultimately they have to make a profit or they can't exist. That's the bottom line. I do think there's probably better quality of food there. It's usually fresher.
And the price is very high because of all of that.
Right. I would also say, though, that you still have to be careful because of a lot of people just aren't educated. So, for instance, we have a favorite restaurant here in town that we go to for special occasions. But I would be willing to bet you that even though they make their salad dressing in-house, I'd be willing to bet you that it's probably made with some type of seed oil, because people don't really understand how destructive that is for you. And part of that's because we can buy it, and we've been encouraged to cook all of our food and make all of our dressings and make all of our condiments. You can't pick up a bottle of mayonnaise or ketchup or barbecue sauce or honey mustard, whatever it is, all the things. First ingredient, soybean oil, first ingredient, canola oil, some variation of it, okay? That stuff is poison. It is so bad for your body. Your body, we get 30% of our calories from that crap now. Our body is not designed for that. Okay? And then we have to do another show one day about the history of soybean oil because it'll blow your mind. But saying all that, you know, a lot of people in these finer restaurants, they don't know that they're, you know, and even they're kind of in trouble because let's say they're trying to do better. They just want to make their salad dressing with avocado oil, say. Okay, well, in the United States, avocado oil, it only has to be 40% avocado oil to be called avocado oil. So it could be 60% soybean oil, and it's not on the label, and you don't have any way of knowing.
It should be criminal, in my opinion.
I agree.
Well, another point about the fine restaurant that we like to attend is that they offer alternatives to things like mashed potatoes, such as mashed up cauliflower, which is not one of my favorites. But the important point is they're offering it.
And I will add also that that particular restaurant will give you like double veg instead of the starch. Just a side note, starch is sugar. So that counts.
Right.
But the other thing I would like to encourage people to do is ask. Don't be afraid to say, you know, let's say you go to the local steak place, local chain place, and you know, it always comes your steak and your potato and your salad, or your steak, your potato, and your veg. Ask them if you can swap out the potato. 9 times out of 10, they'll say no problem. You know, or maybe, oh, well, we'll do it for an upcharge. Okay, $1 or $2, it's worth it. Just swap it out. But my point is, don't be afraid to ask. It's okay to ask. All they can do is say no. If they say no, you deal with it and you don't go eat there again. That's what I would do.
Yeah, if they have to swap out a potato for a couple bucks more, that tells you something about the potato being the cheap food product.
I mean, everybody needs to understand, and I say this with all the love in my heart for potatoes because that's my thing. Everybody has their comfort food. For a lot of people, it's bread, whatever. Mine's potatoes because I grew up, I had a potato at every meal. But it's filler food. It's not. Now, I'm not even saying all potatoes are bad in the right kind of circumstances. I mean, it's not an ultra-processed food. So it's a real food. But, I mean, if you have a sugar problem, if you're a diabetic, nope. Potatoes are a no. But it is filler food, just like bread's filler food. Pasta's filler food. Starches, they're all filler food.
I do have a question. We'll deviate just for a brief moment on this. The potato is a real food, but is the potato that's bred for today a healthy choice? Well, it's never a healthy choice because it's basically sugar, but the breeding of plants.
Well, that's a whole nother episode. But I wouldn't necessarily say a potato is bad food. It's real food. And actually, if you cook a potato and it's cooled in the refrigerator, rice is the same way. If you cool it in the refrigerator like overnight and then eat it the next day, you create resistant starch, which isn't as high glycemic index. It's still high. It's not, don't take that as if you're diabetic, you can eat potatoes as long as you cook them the day before. You can't.
Okay. Diabetics can't.
But this is the thing. If you're metabolically healthy, you can have potatoes once in a while. Sweet potato is a better choice. But I would also say there's only 10% of the people in this nation right now that are metabolically healthy. That's how sick we are and how desperately we need to address what we're eating, because that's the number one thing you can do to combat the majority of these things.
Real quickly, how does that compare to Europe, Canada, if you know the overall health rates versus their diets?
I don't really, this sounds awful, but I don't really have numbers for them. I do know we spend, I was just looking at my notes here trying to figure something out. We spend, I know I just had this written down somewhere. Of course, I can't find it now because I'm trying to find it. But we are the sickest country in the world. It's why we had the most people die of COVID. We're the sickest country on the planet. And we spend the most on our health care. So how does that make any sense?
Right.
You if it translated, it would be, we spend the most, we have the best results, but we don't. But that's also by design.
Right.
Because remember, a customer cured is a customer lost.
And therefore the food and health industries are united in some fashion.
Yes, they're working together. So I would just add, we're going to have an upcoming episode where we talk about RFK Jr. and the potential coming up for some things to change. We may never see this opportunity again. So if you truly believe something needs to change in our healthcare, our food, our medical, something, you need to be supportive when these changes start to come, because there's going to be all kinds of pushback. You've seen nothing yet. There's too much money involved for there not to be huge pushback.
Okay, one final point we have on number 10 there. Real easy for everyone. Park furthest away from the store entrance.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of this one. My husband can attest. I used to harangue him all the time because he would not park the closest possible to the store entrance. But this is a no-brainer, easy way for you to get extra steps in during the day. And that's really what it's all about, trying to build in extra steps in your day. Like if you have an appointment and you go into a building and your appointment's only the next story up, just take the stairs. You don't need to take the elevator. Take the stairs. It's okay. You'll make it, And the more often you do it, the more it will become, it's just what you do. Parking the farthest away from the grocery store, if it's not pouring down rain, if you do it enough, now obviously you want to be, make sure you're in a safe area, all the things, but, you can do it, and pretty soon, and one great thing, you'll never lose your car in the parking lot again because you'll be able to see it. Nobody else parks at the back of the parking lot.
Nope.
But you'll be able to see your car right away.
Parking close is not a contest. And I would argue that everyone should get their hands on some sort of step counting device. I have a nice Garmin watch.
Right. I have one.
An app on your phone. All sorts of ways to keep track of that and give you a metric. Right.
You don't have to have an Apple Watch. You can go on Amazon. Mine is just a basic step. Well, actually, it's got a little bit more than that. But, you don't have to spend a lot of money on that either. But I do recommend it because most people, I was guilty. You think you're walking a lot more than you really are.
Mm-hmm.
So just to put that little perspective, we want to aim for about 10,000 steps a day. And, lots of times you think, oh, I'm so busy. I know I'm walking a lot. I know. And then when you really look, you're maybe walking 2,000.
Okay, Kimberly, thank you for being on Transmitter 42 again. Well, these are a collection of things that we can all apply almost instantly and get off to 2025 with a big bang and be less dependent on other means from the health industry. Try to divorce yourself from the health industry as much as you can.
Thrive in 25.
Thrive in 25. Thank you, Kimberly. Thanks for listening to the Transmitter 42 podcast. If you would like to send us feedback or suggestions, please email us at radioshow@t42.am or send a note via U.S. mail to Transmitter 42 LLC, P.O. Box 100, Remington, Virginia 22734. All our podcasts are available for your favorite player. Visit t42.am for our catalog. Transmitter 42.